Hey everybody, Brandon here. Welcome back to another tournament game analysis video. Today we are continuing the analysis of the Excelsior March tournament, and this was played back in 2024, as pretty much all of the videos coming out over the next couple of weeks will be. So I am playing against the Morali with the black pieces, and also it's important to recognize or just mention I beat a national master in the first round. I drew an international master, one of the best players in Canada, in the second round. I ended up losing my third game, but I feel like I learned a lot, and that's, I guess, what it's all about. And now I'm in game number 4. So I'm in a pretty good spot in the tournament. And unfortunately, because I'm playing someone who is rated 1400 national ranking, this affects my performance rating. So performance ratings are calculated not by the amount of points you get necessarily, but also mainly what your opponent's rating is, and then plus or minus 400. So since my opponent is rated 1400, this is equivalent to losing a game against the 2200. And that's relevant because when you're going for a norm, you need 2300 average rating performance. So this is going to knock my performance rating down quite a bit. Not too big of a deal because there's still one more game to go, but let's get into it. So we see b3, I play d5, and generally what I like to do is what Sam Shinklin mentioned in his semi-Slav course, or his Sidelines course, is that when you play against moves like b3 or e3, these kind of one-off positions, it's just nice to play some sort of Slav setup. And if you can, play bishop to f5. So it's like a London system or a Slav with the bishop outside of the pawn chain, which is exactly what I do. So bishop f5, e6, knight f6, and knight d7. And the whole point here behind knight d7 is I'm trying to see if they go for something like knight to h4, which I don't think is correctly timed, as bishop g4 is able to be played. And any time they play something like f3, bishop to h5 and g4, I can actually gladly take on g4, where this knight is undefended. So after pawn takes, queen takes h4, the king moves somewhere, king d2, let's say, and bishop takes g4, I'm up 2 pawns and winning the game. Of course, my opponent's not going to play that. He's a pretty decent player. He played knight b d2. And now I played bishop to e7. So again, setting this idea up one more time. But after bishop to e2, I'm no longer able to play it, so it's time to play h6. Note that if I do something like castles here, knight h4, bishop g4 is not playable. Bishop e4 is something. I don't really like to play this if I don't have to, and there's no reason to force myself into those positions, so h6. We see h3, c6, and then c4. So it's, again, pretty much a semi-Slav setup, but instead of this bishop on c8, it's on f5, and those positions are usually considered to be quite challenging for white to find like a big advantage. So with the bishop on a better path, I guess we could say, or just in a better spot, we can definitely tell that black is totally fine, maybe even slightly better here. So castles was played. Castles, I played rook to e8. So the whole idea here is I'm trying to see what they do with this tension. Black really doesn't want to let go by playing d takes c4 here, taking away from the center, and also after b takes on c4, this pawn takes towards the center, where now, yeah, this type of structure is just not so great. e4 might be playable soon. Black's going to feel some problems with the space in this position, like rook e1 and bishop to f1, for example, will prepare the move e4. And there's just no reason to do this because I'm not really at a space disadvantage here. So I go rook e8, and I'm seeing if they take or not. They could end up pushing, but pushing has its own consequences as well. And we'll explain that a little bit later. But basically, I'm trying to see if they take on d5, where I will take with the e-pawn, and we actually end up in a queen's gambit declined position, which I'm actually quite fond of getting anything exchange QGD, which is probably why I shouldn't be playing the exchange Slav in the first place, because this creates some sort of imbalance even when white's trying to maybe kill the game, especially compared to the exchange Slav. So the big strategic battle in these exchange QGD positions is if you can get this bishop on this diagonal in time, and we did. So black is most likely totally fine here. And I would agree with that, at least in this position. So rook c1 was played, and then I played a5. So this is basically just targeting this Finchetto position, seeing if they want to make some weaknesses like a4, where b4 becomes quite weak, maybe even some remaneuver, like bringing the knight to b4. It's a little slow, maybe unrealistic, but it's got to be considered. So we see a3, and I was quite happy here. But also I'm not exactly sure what I should do. I want to play moves like bishop d6, but after bishop d6, I mean, maybe this is a little bit too slow because they could play a move like knight to e5, as we can see. Just for example, bishop d6, knight e5, and I can't take it because, unfortunately, this would be a fork. So by playing queen to b8, it's pretty much asking, are you going to be playing these positions like knight e5? Because maybe I'll take it, and once they take back, for example, knight e5 takes, and then knight d7, they might find themselves overextended here. This is kind of what I'm going for. And I still have the flexibility of avoiding that. But that's not the only idea I have. There's also another one. First off, e5 in the future would be nice. So for example, bishop d6 is now ready to... I'm ready to play e5. Just like in the previous position, I am ready to play e5 here. So that's why knight e5 has to be looked at. But by playing queen b8, it asks another time in a row, what are they doing with this tension? Are they going to take and then maybe play something like knight e5, or are they going to play knight e5? It just leaves things up for question. And it sets up another move, b5. Because if we can get into some sort of exchange Slav position, for example, b5, they end up taking. Let's just say, it's hard to find a good move here. Maybe rook e1 and b5. I think this is actually best here. But the idea is that after something like takes, and queen b7, rook c8, we honestly have a space advantage, if anything, here. And by playing b3 and a3, it feels like white has more weaknesses than us having this b5 pawn here. And that's absolutely true. I was a little bit worried in the game to go b5, because I was worried that something like rook c6 could come at the end, and that it would give them unnecessary activities. So I decided just to continue with bishop to d6, the whole point here being that e5 is maybe ready to play. So they go king to h1, and what do I play? So it is actually not a move you may expect. It's not e5 or b5. So b5 again, I was just so worried of some sort of position, with a rook c6, and maybe just the fact that, like, first off, I can't play queen b7 anymore. That's a little annoying because this bishop's hanging. I wasn't exactly sure what I should do about that. If I should just go rook c8, play that position out, which I think is reasonable. For example, if they try queen c1, I can go queen b7 now because they can't take on d6. But there's a lot of consideration there. And it's not so easy just to make those moves. And e5 feels like a mistake, and I think it is. And the reason why is because after taking on e5, not only does it open up their bishop, which is, you know, one of the downsides of making this pawn break, is that they can take on d5. And my dream is to take it with the knight, because if I can take it with the knight, then I don't ruin my pawn structure. Whereas if I play c takes d5, it's a little ugly. But the reason why I can't is because e4 would win a piece. So what do I do? If I want to play e5, because it does have some benefit for black, it's not just something for white with this bishop. It's also the fact that just being able to open up the king side on my side a little bit by trading or getting this pawn off the board, which is why I was hoping for this, by the way. It means that maybe their king could be a little bit weaker. That's usually what happens in these Queen's Gambit decline positions, or exchange QGD positions. So I played bishop h7, and the whole point here is if they play something like king to g1, now e5 can be played. Where after d takes, knight takes, c takes, I can now play knight takes. And e4 does not win a piece anymore, which is really nice. So it would be able to let me clear things off in the center. So instead they played c5. I'm pretty happy, I think, to see this move, in all honesty. I think the reason why is because when you play c5, it feels like e5 is almost stronger. So the reason I say that is because when we looked at this variation, king g1, e5, all this stuff, they end up trading on d5. And it doesn't feel so bad for white here, in my opinion, honestly. I think it's totally fine to play. However, if instead we see that that pawn was on c5 for some reason, that pawn's quite weak. And that, I think, is the problem with c5. Where after bishop c7 and b4, we're able to go for e5. It turns out I had a really nice defensive opportunity here to play b5 myself, to make sure that it would be much harder to make a pawn break. These types of moves are very difficult for me to find, and I think you guys could also understand why I didn't find this. And I would have to think a little bit more or analyze a bit deeper, in all honesty, to remember exactly why these positions are totally fine to play. Because this looks, it just looks wrong every time I see a backward c pawn on an open c file. But I do know that black does have enough play for it. So yeah, instead I end up taking on b4. And again, I think I had b5 as an opportunity here. B5, cb, and queen takes b. Where we have a weak c pawn, but they have a weak b pawn. And arguably our pieces are just better. Mainly because this piece is just good. Same thing with their bishop, right? Because they're on opposite color squares of our central pawns. So usually that's considered the good bishop. But then our bad bishop is way better than their bad bishop. Their bad bishop doesn't really do too much in this game besides control the e5 square. Whereas now when you play positions like this, where they do take en passant recapture, then, I mean, yeah, we're playing mainly on the queen side here. Maybe a little bit in the center, but mainly on the queen side. So this bishop's use becomes a lot less, and also it becomes a target for the future, like queen b4. This bishop's already hanging. So I ended up playing bishop to e4. And the idea behind this move was after I play e5, if they ever play knight f3, I want to be able to take. So e5 is a very good looking move here. And the whole point is that after taking, knight takes, bishop takes, queen takes, you gotta calculate the captures. Not really too difficult there. But knight to f3 comes, and then knight to d4, like queen c7, knight d4. And it feels like they just improved a lot of their pieces, whereas mine kind of stayed the same. So by playing bishop to e4, if I could play bishop e4 and then bishop takes on f3 in one move, I think that's an exchange I would actually like to make. And I don't think I'm wrong, but again, b5 was just a much stronger move, so this was not the right call. But yeah, I go bishop to e4. They go king back to g1. And because they play king g1, this actually lets me play on in the way that I wanted to with e5. And again, we're going to see why they wish that they didn't play c5, that they instead were able to take on d5 in these positions. Because now that we finally get this position, it feels like this is potentially overextended, and this b7 pawn is kind of hard to attack, at least for the meantime. So they also did me a favor by taking on e4 instead of going knight f3, because after takes, their bishop would have been at least a little bit more active. But after takes and knight takes, it kind of gave me a tempo because they played bishop to f3 anyways. So they could have just played it the other way around. And now I found a way to just continue adding pressure in a way that I'm pretty happy with, which is queen b2. The whole point is queen f2 is just a massive threat, and if they do something a bit silly, I might be able to take on b4 followed by c5. They might win b7, but I'll be up a pawn at the end. For example, rook e2 takes, and if they do something like this, let's just say they do this. First off, knight c3 does win. But even if something like that wasn't available, let's just say something similar to this somehow happened, this doesn't look so bad. And yeah, I'm up a pawn, so I'd be quite happy with this. But instead, here, they took on e4, which I think was the most testing move, but they had to follow it up correctly. After rook takes on e4, they played rook b1, and then, sorry, here, rook to b3 is the correct move. This is the moment I was trying to mention before. And every single time I looked at this position, I was pretty happy to see queen b3. It felt like there's something about to go wrong for white after queen b3, which we will actually see in the game. But rook b3 and queen a4, surprisingly, white's doing okay. They can go queen to b1, queen b5, queen b2, rook a4, and then rook to b1. And they can kind of just sit there. And I was really shocked during the analysis to find that out. Because first off, I can never play for any normal type of backward pawn or IQP positions where you try to play c5 to take advantage of it, because they're very well prepared against some sort of exploitation of a pin. If anything, I'm the one that's going to land in trouble here. So yeah, there's not really a way to break this position down. Anytime I move my queen, I have to worry about b5 coming, which is a bit of a problem. So yeah, I guess I could shuffle with moves like rook c4, but it's hard to make progress, surprisingly. So I just have to hope that maybe after a move like rook c4, they end up making a weakening move, or, you know, moving their rook for some reason. But instead, queen b3 trades off pieces, my aggressive queen for their defensive queen. And amazingly, it's better to have them on the board. Usually when you're trying to defend in positions, you want to trade pieces off. At least usually they're aggressive pieces for your defensive ones, because that means that their attack somewhat goes away. But I think black's advantage here isn't just mainly with the queens, it's actually with the rooks. So after queen takes on b3, and then rook to c4, pretty important move, there is some trouble. I'm almost prepared to go rook to c2 and then rook to a2 with a pretty decent attack. But even then, it's a bit harder to find amazing moves for white. So rook to b1 was played. And then I played f5. This was actually not the right way to play it. I think something a bit more classic, like rook a4, was a bit smarter. Or even king f8. And the reason why is because after f5, I weakened the 7th rank a bit too much, which is going to be a theme of this game. And they can actually get away with b5, I believe, here. So the whole point of rook c4 was that whenever they play b5, I can take on c5. But now, after taking on c6, they can go for rook b7, rook c7, and then this rook to b7. And I'm having some troubles on the 7th rank here. Luckily, black, I believe, is okay here. But this adds a lot of complexity to the game. I didn't think it was going to be enough, because I thought, hey, I'm going to win the pawn. And anytime they play something like rook to b7, maybe I can play rook to f8. But let's go down the variation again. Rook c5, takes, rook b7, rook f8. If they go rook c7, I go rook f7. They actually can give a check. And now I can't go king h7 because I lose the rook. But if I go rook f8, they get rook to b7. Now I'm losing. So this is a bit of a problem. And yeah, obviously I don't want that. But they go g3. And now after king f7, I do believe that I'm fine, because I can go king f6 and moves like rook g8 to defend everything. I still think b5 is maybe one of their best options. But they go f4. And Their weakening is way worse than mine because now anytime they bring their king up to get involved in the game, I can deliver a check with rook to c2, and then I can play the other rook to a2, and that is just decisive. So at this point, black is winning. So I play king f6, and the idea here is maybe g5 is an idea. I might still go rook a4 or even rook e8, but then they go h4. And now this gives me a path in. And all I got to do is just move my king in and just win the game. So king to g6. If you found the move, congratulations. The idea is that these light squares are just too weak. So king to f2 is played, and now they brought their king to the second rank. And it's important to play a specific rook to the second rank. I could play rook to a2, but the problem is after rook to b2, they are defending a little bit, right? Because unfortunately, after rook to c2, for example, they can take, and maybe go king to f3, something, or move back. I'm not really sure. It still looks pretty bad for white, but it's not as decisive as it once was, especially when you see rook c2. So rook c2, of course, is the move, and the whole idea here is after they play king f1, we can play rook to a2. So this comes with tempo. They don't have time to blockade on the second rank. Now, one thing to also mention is that when I looked at this position, and if they go rook 1 to b2, I think maybe rook b4 is working. Wait, no, it's not. Okay, you know what? That's why I like to analyze before. So if it's not in the notes, probably shouldn't mention it. But yeah, rook c2, king to f1, rook a to a2, and now they go b5. But this is just too late. I bring my king in, king h5. They take on c6. I could consider king g4. I just didn't see a point. That's how you lose chess games, right? If you try to make things complicated for no reason. There's absolutely no reason to do that here. So b takes c6, rook b7, but this one's different. King g4 is totally fine, giving up that pawn with check, because then king to f3 or king to h3 comes, and that is definitely decisive. And all we need to see is that after rook g7, king f3, that moves like rook to h2 and rook to h1 are mate, and this king helps quite a bit. So they played rook 7 to b3, so instead, if I play king f3, they have e4 as a discovered check. No reason to allow this. Just go rook h2, and then after they play king to g1, I made the worst mistake possible. I played king to h3, which is obviously winning. But it turns out that giving a check first is just a little bit better. The whole reason is because now after king h3, there's no blocking on the b file. So rook h1 is mate, next move no matter what. Whereas when I play king h3, they can block. But of course, this is just completely winning. And they resigned anyways. But for accuracy's sake, I should definitely be a bit more careful there. Not really a big deal. I mean, it wasn't really a mental checkout. I was trying to make sure I still was careful, especially with taking back on c6 and making sure that rook g7, when I give up this pawn with check, that there isn't some weird resource, which I didn't really find. But overall, that was I think a good game. It's good that I won it. Again, it's a bit unfortunate with some open tournaments sometimes where you get a pairing and because at least it is in terms of trying to get a national master norm, because now it's a little bit harder because it's the equivalent of losing to a 2200. And for reference, if you could draw 5 2300s, you would get a norm. So losing to a 2200, in this case, it wasn't losing, it was winning against a 1400. But performance-wise, that's actually the same thing. And that's a bit unfortunate because I felt like I had a pretty good tournament up to this point. Anyways, that's going to be it for this game. The next game is incredibly heartbreaking. It's stayed in my nightmares longer than I'd like to remember. And I think that you can probably guess how that game went. But it's not exactly how you think. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed. And I'll see you in the next tournament game analysis video.